2003, gave a speech at the Travel Indaba in Durban. And he spoke about if he could take time out from his presidency, he was president then, what he would do. And he started painting the beautiful picture of Masvingo, the great Zimbabwe. He'd go there to look at the ruins of the great Zimbabwe. He will go to Mali, to Timbuktu, to look at the repository of knowledge. And I was listening to this, I said, but that's a picture of Africa we don't get to see and we don't get to hear. Because when we hear about our continent, we just hear about how negative things are with our continent. But our continent, by the way, it's driven by other people's brands and ideas. I think most of us were not born in 1886 or when Coca-Cola was there, speaking about things go better with Coca-Cola. But we know that nothing was going better for us because around the table were a bunch of white guys sitting around and discussing about how they're going to take a slice of this continent for themselves and divide the continent into what we see it is. But some Africans like Kenyatta, like Jomo Kenyatta said, when they came to our continent, they taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. And when we opened our eyes, they had the land in their hands and we had the Bible. That's why we love Jesus so much. We're going nowhere else, but we're going to church on Sundays, right? Meanwhile, they are busy still fighting. They're fighting for our coffees. They are fighting for our lands. I mean, I saw this a few years ago, and Madonna was trying to come to Africa and trying to go to South Africa. They said, stay away from South Africa. That's Oprah's territory. Maybe you go to Malawi. So you think this just happened during colonial times, but it happened even up to these days. And that's why they look at us, after saying all they've said about us, they say, that's such a shithole continent. That's what they say about us, right? And then they come up and they make movies for us. And then, us. Who went to see Black Panther? All of us went to see it, right? But my good friend Zakes Mda, Professor Mda, he says, today's generation who are desperate for narratives that validate them and give them a modicum of humanity have adopted an American-invented Africa. So even this is not our story. We didn't write this story. It was written by somebody in Hollywood. And some of these stories are like, we grew up with them with Tarzan. I was like, hey, Tarzan, he must just come to one of our national parks now and try that trick. I just want to see something. You just put him there with the lions. So you can just see what happens. And I love this guy, Dave Schilling from Guardian. He says, the whole idea of a white man trying to save Africans is just ridiculous. But our continent, folks, is not a country. Because when they write about us as if we are one big country. And of course, what Fela Kuti says, 99% of what you know about our continent is wrong. So I took a little bit of the journey. I said, let me cross some borders. Let me try and understand the continent a bit. Let me go, and some of the journeys were interesting because, for me to get to Cabo Verde, I had to go to Portugal. Then to Portugal to come to Cabo Verde. For me to go to Guinea-Bissau, I was in Senegal to go to Guinea-Bissau. I first had to go to Morocco. 4 hours up and then 4 hours down. So that's why you hear people like Dangote saying it takes 38 passports to move around the continent. It's like we have to do something someday about this continent of ours. And of course, when we travel, most of us, what do we want to do? We want to lie on the beaches, shipping Waya Chardon, and talk about the soft life and all those. I did none of that. I said, I'm not doing soft life, I'm doing real life. I'm going to dress the way they dress. I'm going to eat where they eat. I'm going to walk where they walk. Because I wanted to feel the continent, the pulse of the continent without the filters of modern society, if you will, or rather the Western brands, if you will. And sometimes some of the things that I did, I go eat what they eat. That's what you do in Africa. The way to a man's heart is through the stomach. So I went to this place in Guinea-Bissau, Equatorial Guinea rather, and I said to we ate this beautiful place. It was amazing, the food that we ate. Stew was delicious. And I said to my driver, I said to the chef after during the meal, I said, what am I eating? It's so amazing. It was like beet and satsa type of their satsa. I said, what is this stew? He says, it's stew. I said, yeah, what kind of stew? He says, fresh meat. I said, I'm sure it's fresh, but what kind of a fresh meat is it? He says, fresh meat. Because, people get upset when you start talking about their food and about who they are, right? So I said, let me not argue with the man. Let me just continue. I finish eating. When I finish eating, I walk out and I see on the side of the street, people are chopping things. They are braising things. And I said to my driver, what are they doing? He says, they are preparing fresh meat, sir. So now you know, right? Now you know how it goes. But of course, what Alex says is that to travel is to find out that we are wrong about everybody else's country. But this, I love it. I think it's instructive. If you reject the food, you reject ignore the customs, you don't like the religion, then it's better to stay home. So you learn that when you travel, that it is better to stay home. People say to me, how do you travel so incessantly? You're in different countries all the time. You eat different things. I said, I leave South Africa at the airport. So when you want to travel and you're Zimbabwean, you better leave Zimbabwe at Robert Gabriel Mugabe International. Because that way you are able to understand the rest of the world, to understand how they think and how they do things better. But this continent is amazing. It's a continent of opportunities. As Coca-Cola, the biggest brand, discovered. I mean, we are urbanizing. They say 62% by 2050. We are making babies like it's getting out of fashion. It's never been a problem. Never been a problem. I think Ugandans and Zimbabweans understand this concept better than anybody. The Ugandan minister said to me once, he says to me, Thebe, my country alone, we will contribute to this number. I said, how? He says, we just look at a woman and there's 8 babies already. And some countries, other countries like Nigeria, I think Nigeria stopped counting at 100 million. Because when you ask them how many people there, it depends on you mean. There's 200 million of us. You meet anybody, there's 300. Because I think what Nigeria is important to feel that they're big. So they have to mention a number that's intimidating. So it depends who you are. If you are from Ethiopia, they know Ethiopia is 125, they're like, we're 200. If you're South Africa, they say that's little country. We're 500 million. That's just how Nigerians are. But we are a very young continent. I mean, between 2017 and 2015, 51% growth in young people alone, the age of 0 to 24. So it's a very, very young continent. That says a lot about who we are. But of course, we are educated. They are unemployed, and they feel like they're unheard. So what do? They go into the streets. They say, because we don't see any opportunities here for us, we are going to go to the streets and we are going to deal. We're going to deal with you. Right? They say, we are not your ancestors. We can deal with you better. We are making money. I don't know where we're going to make this, but Wamkele says by 2030, we'll be at 50% intra-Africa trade. Folks, we are only at 15% right now. 15%. The borders are not open. So Wamkele says in 6 years' time, we'll have 50%. It's impossible if we do, unless we have political will. To me, the key is political will in this continent. Unless we can sort out these presidents of ours, nothing's going to happen. But let me give you a sense of the brands that we're creating. We're talking about startups and all those. What they're going to do, their job is to create new ideas, new products, new solutions, new brands. Let me give you an idea of what the brands are in the continent. So I do this study for the last 14 years of the most admired brands in the continent. And can you see? Yeah. I do a study of the most admired brands in the continent. And here is the truth. Only 20% of the brands that Africans admire are made in Africa. So Africans reject 80% of anything from Africa. So that is why, as a people, we are not moving as fast as forward as we ought to be, because we reject anything that we make ourselves. Because we're more excited about Nike, about Samsung, about Adidas, and many other brands than anything that's made from here. If you look at us between 1970 and 2000, that's the last time we created numbers of brands. Since then, we're just going on with a few brands in the continent. When you ask us to create brands, we want to get drunk. We want money, we want food, and we want to talk. That's the categories where we dominate. So if you look about the brands, I mean, it's where we are. It's Econet, it's EcoCash, it's Satsa, it's Highfields, and Zeke, and yeah. So then we're doing good. We're happy. That's us. But we're very happy to buy the vehicles from overseas, to buy the technology from overseas. But the one I could never understand is we also want to buy the clothes from overseas. I mean, and some of us think when we are wearing all these beautiful African fabrics, they're ours, they're all from Holland, Vlisco. And I know we give them local names and we think they're ours. They're not even from here. That's our problem. If you look at the number of MNCs operating in the continent, a few of them are quite, Ethiopian Airways is unbelievable. But if you look at most of them are in the financial services space and technology and mobile space. But those are two of the most transformative categories in the continent, but also in the world. Our problem is, as Ali, the Tanzanian Kenyan, said, we produce what we don't consume, and we consume what we don't produce. That is why we are where we are right now. And I think it's the most important thing to remember. We produce what we don't consume, send it out. And consume what we don't produce, import. That's why we've got such big import bills as a continent. And when we come up with good ideas, so we come up with the SAB Miller and all those, we sell it as soon as we think it's big enough. So it's big enough, I want to make money. South Africa created DSTV, selling it to the French. Next year, September, it will be owned by the French. March, in by September. Here, Zimbabwe came up with Mazoi from the Mazoi Valley. What did we do? Sold it to Schweppes. And then they're like, but it's not the same. Mazoi, the one they sell in South Africa is not the same as the one we have here. It's not yours anymore. You sold it. You sold it, and that's the problem that we have as a continent. Meanwhile, look at our export, all going down. So we are not exporting much, but we are importing en masse. 64% of us, if you ask us about, do you believe in Africa? Yeah, we believe in Africa. But only 20% of us say, but we'll buy African brands. Do you see the contradictions that we are facing as a people? I love what Dr. Amos said. He says, you cannot consume your way to equality. You have to produce yourself to equality. So we need to produce. I was driving here all the way. I was looking at some of these farms. I'm like, there is no reason Zimbabwe should be hungry. We should be looking at those farms and say, how can we turn them into food? If you go to our friends in Uganda, that country doesn't go hungry one day. It's probably the most food secure country in the continent, better than any other. And all the food is produced in Uganda. So the way to solve the problems, what we're going to ask all these businesses that are starting up and entrepreneurs and young people who are educated but unheard, we're going to ask them to stop blaming government. Stop blaming everybody else. Stop begging. Stop going out and begging the WHO says, please give us your vaccines. Create your own vaccines. Stop borrowing money, because what happened in Kenya? They said, you are not going to mortgage our future by borrowing so much money. What we need to do is we need to start branding. We need to build brands, and in building brands, we need to understand that we cannot depend on government. Nobody trusts government. Nobody trusts government. You need government to create an enabling environment, but you don't need government to be running the economy. And that's the problem that we have as Africans. We trust business. And that's why we want entrepreneurs. That's why we want these young startups. That's why we want these young people to start businesses that are going to create. We need to do what my two good friends, Dambisa Moyo says, we need to kill aid, and we need to use the power of brands as a new way we're gonna change the continent. We know something about what brands do, and that's why I'm such a big advocate of brands. That brands of a country, more often than not, become how people see the countries. Because if you think about it, if you think about Swiss made in Germany, made in Japan, how did we know about those? We know that throughout the brands that they've done. So whether it's the Swiss watches, whether it's a McDonald's from America, whether it's a Nokia from Finland, those brands have helped to change the images of the country. So the way we're going to change the image of this country and any other country in the continent is by creating the brands that tell the story of an entrepreneurial country and continent, a continent that is innovative and resourceful. And that's what we need to do. How are we going to do it? I'm going to leave you with three things that I think we can do to change this continent of ours. One is we need to reclaim our culture. We need to reclaim our culture because otherwise you're going to have people like this from 1835 says, if the African believes that anything that is English and not African is better than theirs, we will take away their self-esteem and ultimately they'll be what we want them to be. That's what happened to us. That is exactly what's happened to us. They've taken away everything from us, and that's why Ngugi wa Thiong'o says, the moment we lost our languages is the moment we lost our bodies, our gold, our diamonds, our coppers, and our tea. Do you remember the Kenyans jailed him in 1972 for writing in Kikuyu? And this is a professor of literature in New York, but he's a Kenyan. They jailed him for writing, but we don't jail anybody for writing, French people for writing in French and translating into English. They jailed him because he says, I think better when I think through in my language. We are not Belgians, we are not French, we're not Portuguese, we're just African. And there's different parts of us in this continent. And that's why I love what the East Africans say. They say, we need to speak Kiswahili as our language. When you go to Botswana are amazing. I mean, I'm sure you've been to Botswana, a lot of Zimbabweans in Botswana. When you go to Botswana, what happens to Botswana? In the middle of a meeting, they start speaking Setswana. You're like, hey, I'm here, and I only speak Shona. They're like, that's your problem. We are in Botswana here. We should appreciate that. The same way that we go to France, they speak French. I met this young man in Rwanda, and I said to him, what's your name? He said, my name is Jean-Pierre. I said, Jean-Pierre? I'm like, no, what is your name? You know the one when your mother is upset with you. Because you know when our mother's upset, they call us the names. And then he gave me this name, I forget what it was, Murera or something. I said, what does it mean? He told me the meaning of the name. I said, oh, how did that name come about? He told me how the parents came up with the name. I said, that's beautiful. Why don't you go with that? He says, oh, we have to make it easy for them. I said, who are they? The French, when they come here. I said, when you go to France, do they make it easy for you? I said, when you go to France, do they say, oh, we need to speak in Rwanda? Here's a Rwandan here. They didn't do that. But as Africans, we lost, as Ngugi was said, we lost everything because we changed everything for them. Instead of them adjusting to us, we adjusted to them even in our own countries. So we need to reclaim our cultures, whether it's in our fashions that we wear, whether it's arts and culture, whether it is taking our traditions and putting them without taking away the sanctity of our cultures. We can celebrate and say, whether it's our music, pianos, and of course, us here, Zimbabweans, we can relate to this because we got a lot of sheep here, and they're running the judiciary. I think it costs like $20 million to get these sheep on their heads. Part of reclaiming our culture is understanding that Coca-Cola did it so well, and the campaign, they used local names and local cultures to enable people to understand the business. That's why I don't understand the South Africans and the Kenyans. The Kenyans, they said to the president, don't come here looking like a Kaunda. You must wear a suit only. And they defined what a suit looks like. They say it's a Western suit, and that's the parliamentary decorum. And that's the same thing they did to Mandela in 94, and he says, go take a hike, and you continue with his shirts. And in South Africa 3 years ago, this young man went in with his traditional underpants and blanket, his ndebele. He went into a shopping mall, and they kicked him out. It caused a furor in SA. They're like, what do you mean? The man was very formal. Matter of fact, he was the most formally dressed person in the country or on that day. As Fela says, you cannot sing African music in good English. So the second thing we need to do is to reclaim our narrative. Take our story back. Take our story back. Take our story back. I think I told you about part of taking this. And that's why the young kids are saying we need to decolonize. Just take our story back. Take the languages. Understand that we're none of those because here's the problem. 63% of the people who write about Africa are not even in the continent. If you go to any bookshelves, you look at the books about Africa, none of them are written by, most of them are not written by Africans. As Miriam Makeba said, what do you expect? The colonizer comes here, they write the history. How can you expect the people who came to colonize you to tell a good story about you? So that's the problem. And that's what Chinua says, until we write our own stories, the hunter will always be glorified. And products and brands and all this is part of us writing our story, our fashion, our technologies. That's how we write our stories. Third, we need to reclaim our creativity. We're very creative people, by the way. But if you look at how much we spend in research, Africa, we spend like 1% of GDP to research. How are we going to make to create innovations and new ideas when we are not spending money on research. We are not spending money on research. Only 1.8% of the world's intellectual property are from Africa. America is like 20-30%. So we need to invest in this. We need to understand that where we are now, we're now in the digital era. So we've changed as a people even, and now we're in the digital era. And in the digital era, technology is the way of the world. That's how we're going to transform the world. If you look at the tech hubs now, if you look at the techs of 353 tech hubs in Africa. By the way, I think there's about 2,000 in Beijing. Beijing, the city, has got more tech hubs or innovation hubs than all of Africa. That gives you an idea why China is progressing as fast as it is, and America is upset with them. 30% of the most admired brands in the continent are tech-led. Now let's look at the most inspiring tech startups in the continent. Flutterwave, Opay, Andela, Wave Mobile, M&T Harlan, all of them are tech-led. All of them are in the financial services because they understand, or health, financial services and health and all those. But technology is a key driver of most of the startups now. And where are they concentrated? I was looking for Zimbabwe, I couldn't find any. Where are the Zimbabwean startups? They're not on the map. We need to get them onto the map. Yeah, we need to get you on the map. Like you know yourself, 2 out of 1.3 billion, you don't even exist. But we need to get you on the map, right? But you can see where the startups are. And it's so interesting, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, South Africa. I'm sure they are, but perhaps not enough. That you see. And we know what technology does, right? It's in banking now these days. We have to give credit to the Nigerians. Do you know when the Nigerians started up with 419, everybody was upset with them? We were calling them crooks and all those. Meanwhile, Nigerians were inspiring the next wave of mobile money. So that's why M-Pesa now is 80%, 60% of Kenya's economy runs through M-Pesa. Of course, here with EcoCash, that's what, 90% of the economy. So it gives an idea how important technology is driving it. You look at Konza, the Silicon, they call it Silicon Savannah in Kenya. So they've created all these Silicon valleys or tech hubs or innovation hubs or startup hubs, whatever. That's what we need to do. I mean, you look at, I was in Somalia. In Somalia, there's two sides to Somalia. People with hard cash like that, but also what's so interesting is EVC. 85% of the economy, of everybody uses EVC to make payments and for money. You look at Discovery, behavioral banking, Vitality, which you offer, and Pedigree, technology again, to be able to determine if medicine is counterfeit or not. Started by our good friend, Wright Simmons. Rwanda, aiming to become the innovation hub of Africa. Because they understand they have to create an enabling environment that empowers innovators, tech-savvy and young population, because that's who we are now. Leading the way for space exploration, fifth in Africa in terms of network coverage. You can see even a country as small as Rwanda, 12 to 15 million, they understand the importance of having these hubs. I mean, this is Rwanda. They use drones to take medicine to rural areas. Yoko in South Africa as a POS. So look at the tech hubs in the continent as they're growing. That's Rwanda. That's Somalia. Yeah, in Somalia, I was in Somalia. There's tech hub. The thing that you cannot avoid as we close is what Nokia learned. Nokia said, Nokia is no longer like the Nokia that it used to be. Nokia now, the little Nokia is just for the small house. We're using, because they say the battery lasts longer. But Nokia says we did nothing and yet we lost. And that's what we don't want to do. Because if you do nothing, we are going to lose as a country. Finally, you need to rebuild trust. And how are you going to build trust? You need to communicate, you need to be accountable, you need to be reliable, you need to be visible, you need to be present, you need to be data-driven. And that's how we're going to move the continent forward. Welcome to your Africa.
I'm going to ask my colleagues Anybody with a burning question before I start? I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Anybody with yes, good doctor?
Challenging, inspiring presentation. It's your beginning. You mentioned, among other things, wanting to change things, political will. How do we get that?
Do you want me to be thrown out of the country? No. No. When I say political will, I'm saying that we need to get our political leaders to make the right decisions that move the continent forward. Because most of them, what do they do every year? They run to Africa, Europe, Africa, Russia, Africa, everywhere else. A good friend of mine, I think you were there, Trevor, in 2015, when Jane Naidu said, everybody's got an agenda for Africa, but Africa's got no agenda for Africa. Yeah. So our guys don't have political will because they just want to run out of the country when the big bosses call from China, Russia, and Europe and America, rather than saying that we are the ones with the opportunities, come here to our country. So now if you look at example of political will, let's look at Botswana for 1 second. So recently, the beers came to Botswana and they said to Botswana, we are here to renew our diamond deal, old terms as always, existing terms, you know how they go. And President Masisi said, no, it's not going to be the same terms. This time, our terms. And they said, no. Don't play hardball with us. If you don't want to take our terms, we've got the customers. Masisi says, I've got the diamonds. We'll find customers for that. And then where did they go? They met each other midway somewhere. That's political will. Where a president of a country says, what is in the best interest of my country? And how can I advance that? Because they know Botswana did it already. They started this process a while ago when they moved their headquarters from London to Botswana. They said, if you're going to mine the diamonds here, you must cut them here, you must polish them here, you must sell them here. That's political will. Political will is also for Rwanda, for example, when the Western countries dump a lot of the what do we call them here? I forget what we call them in Zimbabwe again. The used clothes. You know, there's a place here where it's full of them. And they dump them there and they sell them. They sell us their sweat and their dirty armpits and all those things. In Rwanda, what did he do? He said, this is not a dumping ground. Because he understands one thing, other than the dumping ground, he understands that by dumping these used clothes here, you are killing the textile industry of the country. Because the country now does not need to do this anymore because you are dumping stuff in there. To me, political will is doing the right thing for the country and focusing on that. But then we are the ones who should hold these people accountable. I think if you look at Kenya, Kenya recently, if they don't have political will, we must show them what political will looks like. And that's what the kids in Kenya did. The kids in Kenya said, minus the destruction of public properties and minus all those, it shouldn't have gone to the violence it did. But what the kids demonstrated is these young kids, 70% under the age of 30 in the continent, they are not as patient as maybe us and everybody else. They are saying, if you don't do your job, we will teach you what your job should be. It should be remind you what your job is. That's the challenges that you face. Either you do the right thing for the countries, or the people who are the future of the country will force you to do the right thing. We shouldn't allow it to get to that point.
So you identify the right things that we need to fix. We need to reclaim our culture, our language. We've got an African passport, our narrative, and reclaim our creativity. What's your sense of where we are with trying to do all those things? Are you optimistic? Are you seeing green shoots anywhere that gives you the confidence that we are getting to reclaim this?
Well, if you look at what the kids with Amapiano has done, they remember for a long time were influenced by American rap, American hip hop. We used to walk around with our pants below our matacos, and our legs bow-legged so the pants don't fall off. But now we say, but our music is just as beautiful. Let's export that. So if you go to Dubai, you go everywhere else now, to France, they are playing amapiano. That shows you that if we stand our ground and do who we are, we'll do well. So Maxhosa from South Africa, the South African knitwear brand, which competes with Missoni internationally, just opened a shop in New York. They called it Maxhosa. And the same shop. They will have to learn how to say Maxhosa the way that we've had to learn how to say Penelope and David and Mark and all those names. So, or Jean-Pierre, whatever those names are of theirs. So I think the young people are showing that we can reclaim ourselves in many ways.
Do we have the time? When you say the young people are impatient, do you get the sense that it sounds like it's going to be organic and it's going to be slow? It's not. It doesn't have a leader. Is that your sense?
It's definitely leaderless. It is definitely organic. There's an independence now. There is if you look at a country like South Africa, 70% depends on the state, or 93% depends on 7% of the taxpayers. So that is unsustainable. So at some stage, it will lead to some kind of anarchy or some kind of thing. So I think what's happening now is, do we have the time? The young people have got the time because they are going ahead in the future. I remember I was at the United Nations, President Sata was around, was still alive, Sata from Zambia. I was at the AU, sorry. And Sata arrived late. He arrived late for a meeting with the young, he was going to address the young people. He arrived late, he came running, and his Rafi says, let's go, let's get going. They're like, whoa, hold up. We'll be alive longer than you'll be around. So do not come and rush us on our time. You are late. You must settle down and listen to us. These are the young people telling the president of Zambia then. So that's the type of people that we are. So they may not need somebody to hold the flag like we have as I'm the leader. Like they said in Kenya, they said we are the leaderless youth. We don't need to appoint anybody, because we know what is important for all of us. I think there's you can see everywhere else in the continent, whether it's Nigeria, whether Kenya, South Africa, even Zimbabwe, that the young people are now creating their own lives themselves. It's slow. You wish that to make it faster, you wish that government would play its role, which is to create an enabling
That's
environment.
not happening.
It's not happening because we're not asking governments to do much. We're not asking governments to dig the holes for us or to do it. We just say to them, give me, like in Rwanda, 2 days, 48 hours to get a license to do business. And then I'll pick it up from there.
They won't.
But they won't in many countries.
As we're chatting, excuse me, I've got allergies and they come around like this. Yvonne did a presentation on tourism, how important it is for us to embrace tourism. And she experienced a backlash from some of us who were saying, but how are you able to sell this continent the way it is? And as we're chatting, Kosana said to you, I don't envy your job. How do you market this broken continent? What's your answer to that?
There's an analogy or there's a story about a starfish, about somebody passing, and they saw one guy taking a starfish, because the water had receded, take a starfish and throwing it into the water. And somebody says, oh, you're wasting your time. You're going to be here all night. And he said, if each and every one of us picks up one starfish and put it back, ultimately and sooner, they will all be in the water. I think it's what Mother Teresa once said. Each and every one of us, we must do what we can, where we are, with what we have. So it is not about waiting for this big thing. It's about Trevor saying, I'm in the space of media, understand language, understand how to tell the story. I'm going to take my portfolio of media. I'm going to change the narrative. And I'm going to change it maybe here first, and I keep expanding. That's you doing what you do. It's Thebe saying, I'm going to ignore everything else. I'm going to focus just on brands and look at how I inspire brands to create new brands that speak to Africa.
Do you see a lot of that happening?
I see
on the continent. Do you have examples of that happening on the continent?
Well, I mean, if you go to Nigeria, where the flutter waves of the world are what they're doing, that's literally what is happening now. All those guys who are doing the fintechs in Nigeria, they're all like under the age of 35. So they are technically youth. And around the continent, that's what you're beginning to see. You see young people taking this onto their own hands, particularly in the tech space and in the financial services space. And to me, those are probably two of the most critical categories. Because when you have technology enables you to leapfrog legacy. Technology also enables you to get further faster. And financial services is an enabler. Because you've got money, you are able to make things. So if you can change those, I think you're doing in the right place. To me, those are to me we need media, because media helps to tell a story, a narrative. Because the narrative of Africa has been that you cannot do. If more media says you can do, here are examples of this happening, then of course you begin to see.
You know, the one thing I love about you is you're like Yvonne. You are very bubbly and passionate and excited about the continent, but can you be vulnerable and share with us the one thing that gets you down about the continent? Is there one thing that gets you down, gets at you, grates? Excuse me.
In my book, which has come out now, I think a lot of people were expecting I'm going to talk about how wonderful things are, all the beautiful things, because on my Instagram, so my social media, they see me showcasing the beauty. But on the book, I'm looking at the challenges rather. I'm looking at the challenges of borders. I mean, it doesn't help that, someone like me, South African, perhaps well known, I land in South Africa at 11 o'clock at night. I'm dressed funny, quote unquote, African clothes. They stop me and they say, you're not South African. And I allowed that narrative, by the way, to happen. Because I allowed that experience to happen. Because I wanted to see how far it goes. Yeah. And because it was 11 o'clock, I've never met, this woman says to me, who are you? I said, you can read, it's in the best passport. She didn't swap the passport to see who I am.
At immigration?
At immigration in South Africa, I'm landing.
Wow.
Doesn't swap the passport. Looks at me, it's like, this one pitch black, dressed in those...
because you're black like me. You know?
Exactly. Dressed in those funny things, he cannot be from here.
Yeah.
So I allow the woman, and then I go through to, then he says, closes the immigration thing. Closes. Wow. Now I've been spending 30 minutes with him, takes me to the immigration interrogation. I said, let me go there. I said, this is very interesting. I must go there because I want to see where this thing goes. So we arrived there, and then he says to them in Zulu, can you deal with this one? I've already told her I'm South African, but she obviously doesn't know that because I hear all this thing. So now they call me in. So when they call me in, that's the point I said, maybe I should really remind them I'm South African. And I said to her, you see this, what are you trying to do here? Yeah. Is going to end here. You are going to go back to your desk. You're going to let me into my country. And when I wake up in the morning, you won't have a job an hour. And then as I walk out there, because I'm causing commotion, people come running from immigration. Mr. Ikalafeng, it's you. Sorry, we apologize. He didn't know it's you. I said, it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that. So I think the issue about borders is a problem in the continent because that's the one thing that's... I understand it's important to have territorial integrity, but it's also important to treat everybody with respect and be welcoming. So that always gets me down. How we see whether it's in Comoros, where I walked in with a passport, they took my passport for 3 days, and they said, what are you doing in this country? I said, it's a tourist country. It's an island. 3 people live here. What else could I be doing? And, so I think borders are a problem. I think leadership is a problem. We have to be honest about our leaders. We have unfortunately the worst kind of leaders because we're the ones who put them in power. We not hold them accountable, and we've elevated them as deities. People always say to me, hey, sometimes you call these presidents and ministers by names. I'm like, that's their names. I was like, they call me by my name, so why should I call them anything else? Yeah. I said, they're not honorable because most of them are dishonorable. So we ought to call them what they are. So I think leadership is a problem that we have on the continent. In the continent as well. Because that's why, as the good doctor says, we don't have a political will. Because we, the people, have reduced ourselves to slaves and elevated public servants into deities. And that's where we are as a problem now as a continent. Wow. So that always gets me down. When I move around, I was like, why are we treating these people like this? Because that's why we are where we are. Yeah. Because they're not working for us now. We are now working for them.
Wow. Any questions? I dominated the conversations. Any questions for Thebe at all? I mean, I know we've had a tough day. I can see the eyes and the faces. Any questions before we break for dinner? Any questions? Yes, ma'am?
Good evening. First of all, let's say thank you to Trevor for having these 2 amazing days and for almost having a gender equality in your panel. I appreciate that because most of these conferences you just see men talking. So it was refreshing to see that there were brave women who came out and contributed. Now, regarding to the topic at hand, I applaud you for sharing this with us. What traction have you tried to form so that this is taken down to private schools or government schools at primary level, at secondary level? Because those are the ones that you really need to cultivate or sort of have these ideas embedded in them. For example, like our languages. We are losing our languages because they're not taught at school. At private school here in Zimbabwe, you choose the Shona, Latin, or French. And nobody wants to learn Shona, even the Shonas do not want to learn Shona, they rather choose French. So to me, I was like, this is strange.
So, I think what's important is no one person can fight all battles. So you need to pick your battles. So the battle I've picked is the battle of brands. And I'm now doing it in 2 different or 3 different levels. So all the proceeds from the book and I've put some seed money as well, is starting a Center for African Brands and also scholarship to enable the development of Made in Africa brands. That's just the one part. Next month, I think, or so, a piece of article will come out in African Business, which speaks to something I want to spend most of next year trying to advocate, which is what the Americans did in 1933. In 1933, Americans went to Congress, or Congress enacted a law called Buy America Act. And Biden, when he became president 3 years ago, he upped the number. He revived, well, it's always been in. So 65% of everything that the American government buys must be made in America using American hands and American materials. So that's why America is so great. So I'm trying to now advocate, and I've written the first piece of it, I'm trying to advocate for a Buy Africa Act. Because I'm saying Zimbabwe must insist on at least 50% of everything that the government of Zimbabwe procures must be made by Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe using Zimbabwean material. And that must be the same with each country and collectively as a continent. Because if we can do that, you can see how we will not be slaves to the IMF or even to the AGOAs anymore. They send us crippled chicken, which they wouldn't eat themselves, which they grow in 2 hours. And if you don't want to buy their chicken, what do? They say, we're not going to give you a loan. So I think I can play this, if each and every one of us can play where we are. I think if you are a teacher, you should play a role in the teaching from a languages and all those. Because who are the real reasons why the children don't speak English, Shona or Ndebele at school? We are the reasons. Because what do we say? We say, oh, but you can't speak Shona to her because it makes it difficult for her to understand, to learn English fast. You're like, we grew up speaking these languages. We have the duality, the dexterity to go from one to the other. But we are the ones who are encouraging Mzungu teachers who tell us that the children cannot learn English fast because they're speaking our home languages. So in other words, they do exactly what they said in 1835. If you can take away their language and make them believe that anything that is English and not African is more superior, then you have them completely dominated. That's where we are. So we ought to start there. And that's why what the East African guys did with the language pronouncement, I'm not sure how effective it's been. It's a good start. I mean, if you go to Tanzania, where I was yesterday, there they speak Swahili. I mean, I'm sure they don't understand all these other languages. They speak Swahili first before they say anything else. And that's what we ought to do as well.
Two more questions.
This one and this one.
The chief, let's start with the chief. I mean, so that's the youngest chief in Zimbabwe, 29 years of old. I'm sorry, Chief. I apologize, Chief. Chief Dagamela.
Thank you for the opportunity, Trevor, and thank you for your great presentation. And I wanted to comment because I've been quiet because of these reasons. Now that we say we need to regain our culture, we need to regain our language. So I'm trying to understand now that you're coming from South Africa, someone is coming from Tanzania, and you're seeing people speaking in Swahili. I'm coming from Nigeria, and some are speaking in Shona. And as a result, we are rallying behind English, we are using English, so that all of us can understand. Would we then say English was a blessing in disguise? If not so, then how do we then reverse the gains that have been made by English? Because all of us here, which language would we then speak, or which language would we then use if we are saying we need to regain our culture, our language? But then, secondly, I wanted to ask you to say, why is it you said we are not buying our brands? So I wanted to understand, why do we think, or why is it that our African people are not buying the African products?
It's get a copy of the book on my
The third one, it's more like a comment, because when we are speaking of innovation hub, startup capitals, we are more looking at the urban areas, and like you said, I'm a chief, and I'm more biased in the rural areas. And also the rural areas, I've seen it as 10 constituencies here in Zimbabwe, and 2 urban or 3 urban constituencies. So I wanted to ask, since the leather is coming from rural areas, the maize mill is coming from rural areas, the people they are coming from rural areas, they migrate or they are exported because there are no institutions, no industries which support them in rural areas. And as a result, they are forced to urban areas. And it also happens in urban areas that we are also forced out of Zimbabwe because we are not quite comfortable staying here, and we are not comfortable staying in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start with the last one. So the Ethiopian coffee manufacturers in the rural areas, they used to manufacture coffee for years, and they used to sell it for so little, until they all got together and they made and Starbucks used to buy coffee from them. Starbucks used to make more money, like up to 20, 30 times out of the coffee they make from the Ethiopians. And these growers, who are generally small growers, where you are, perhaps, used to say, but we are not benefiting from this. How is that possible? So they then got together and they then did what we all should be doing in the rural areas. We shouldn't be thinking small chieftainships. We should be thinking, yes, we're all chiefs, but how do we collectively come together for the greater good? What did they do? They then went and decided to add value to their crops, which is the coffee, to brand it, and to create value out of it. So next time Starbucks came back to them, wanted to buy the coffee, the price was 20 times. And they said, but this is unsustainable. How are we going to make money? That's Starbucks now. They said, the same way you make money, we're also selling brands. So now it went on for 3 years. It went went on to multiple courts in the US, in Ethiopia. They arrived at a number. Now both of them are doing well. So it's not about you having to move to the urban areas. It is about you trying to say, how do you look at more people like you and come together to create a cooperative that helps to drive the agenda forward? That's one. Second question, why do people not buy brands? I think Africans, we've just been told that anything made in Africa is not good enough. And that's one. And second, we love to be validated by the world. So if you remember these Ghana must go bags, what do you call the Mashangan bags? The red and white ones. these plastic ones. So these bags, we like to call them funny names, put funny things in them. Then Louis Vuitton put them onto the ramp in 2007. And when Vuitton put them onto the ramp and priced them 100,000, I don't know how many 1,000%, whatever it is, who were the first people to buy them? Africans. And what did they say? There's a beautiful quote I remember. He says, now finally I can take my Ghana must go back in public and not have people laugh at me. Why did you have to wait for somebody to tell you that you're not good enough? So the second problem that we have is we want to be validated. We don't want to assert ourselves. It's what we talked about the language. Assert yourself. Now, your first question has to do with English. It's unfortunate, it is what it is where we are right now, that we need a common unifying language, if you will, whether it's English, whether it's French. Unfortunately, it's all colonial languages. So it's unfortunate that it is what it is for us to be able to do business with them, to talk to them. But having said so, if we were thinking as a proper African Union, and we're not thinking as a union, you now will realize that Kiswahili is 40% of the continent. You now would say, folks, why don't we rally around a language or 2 or 3 languages and make those the official languages of the continent? So when they come, they must also come with their Google Translates. So it's the same way that when we go to their countries, we go around with Google Translates. We have reduced our languages and our cultures into menial, rural ideas. They've elevated theirs into world standards. It's about time we elevated ours as well. It will take time. What did this guy Nicholas Klein said? It was I think in the 1900s. He was a union guy, and he said first they will ignore you, then they will laugh at you, then they will challenge you. Ultimately, they will build monuments to you. So we just have to be patient.
We have to go for dinner, but I'll take the last one, the last question there. Yeah?
Dr. Moyo also has a question.
I can see. Dr. Moyo, you'll have to corner him, eh? Right, okay.
My question is, how do we have Pan-African structure that is available to translate all our Pan-African ideals into practical action, apart from the political AU thing? And then the next one was just to ask about, when we say brands, sometimes we forget that brands are also people. So there's a lot of Africans who have got solutions, who can provide solutions to Africa. But they're not products like brands, they're products, but they're also shunned by us Africans. You find some people look for experts from Europe. If I go to the same person, some African company, with someone from Europe, that person has got an advantage over me. Maybe 30-40% before we look at delivery, competence. Just because coming from there, how do we address these things? Because there's a lot that is happening. When we bring our artists, an African artist is told to be a supporting person, gets $100. The person who is coming from America gets $40,000. Our own Africa.
You made your point, Simon, as brief as you may.
Yeah, I'm going to be brief on the last one. The last one is, why do we always need structures? We already have a structure that's owned by the Chinese called the African Union, and that's funded by the Europeans 80%. So the problem is that you've got all these wealthy Africans, Dangote, the guys from Egypt, the guys, Patrice Motsepe. Our leaders should be going to them and say, let us fund our own structures. And then our guys, when you ask them to set up quote-unquote foundations and all those, they want to do giveaways, hand-downs, instead of investing in fundamental, transformative ideas. If you look at what does Bill Gates do? He puts his money into what? Medicine and agriculture, because he knows that down the road, that's where he's going to benefit for the greater good. Our guys want to treat us like charity, just hand us stuff. That's a problem. In terms of, I remember one day when I went to Ghana for the first time to go present to the president in the early 2000s. And before I go there, they said to me, Thebe, you better come with a white person. Because it was the first time I'm going to Ghana. They said, bring a white person because, people in West Africa, they believe in white people. Like if you come, now I was like, oh my goodness. So I'm the guy who thought he knows everything. Now I need to bring a white guy. So I was like, fine, I'm gonna bring a white guy. I bring two for them. So I arrived at the meeting, so big political bureau of Ghana, the president, vice president, all around the table. I said, oh, white man, please, can you start? So I let the white man start. But you see, if you know yourself and you know your stuff, when you stand up, they will see who's running the show. So I let the white guy speak. When I stood up to speak, they all turned around and looked at me. And afterwards, they told me, we've never seen somebody like you from our continent who does what you do. So because us as well, we also look down on ourselves and we minimize ourselves. When we walk in with an inferior complex. You have to walk in there and say that I'm here to take over this place. Or nobody is better than me. That's why the Burner Boys are doing well. That's why the Trevor Noahs that did well in the world. That's why, are you with me? They take over. You must own the space. But we don't. We already arrive with an inferior complex.
Yeah.
And it's easy to minimize us.
Wow. Well, what do you say? What do you say? Thank you so much, Thebe. Thebe has his book. He's just signed a copy of mine. I wrote half a sentence in the book to say what a great book it is. I recommend you grab the book. You know how much I love books. I've already had a peek into this, 4 or 5 weeks ago or 7 weeks ago? Yeah. More or less.
More or less.
Thebe, thank you.
But it was launched on the 23rd of October. It is the #1 selling book in South Africa, the fastest selling book. Is going to reprint after 7 days. Because I think there's a yearning for African content written by Africans through an African lens.
Absolutely.